Well, welcome everyone to another social distance learning brought to you by the Liberal Gun Club. We will continue doing these until COVID is no longer a thing. So expect these for some time. Tonight, the Bench Doctor will be showing us the Nagant Revolver in all its heavy trigger pull glory. This is currently being streamed out of Zoom to Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook. We can't stream to YouTube because they don't like it when people are handling firearms live on the stream. So this will be recorded, of course, and put up on YouTube later. So everyone knows, all participants but the moderators and presenter have their video shut off and are muted. If there are questions, please put them in the Discord Q&A channel or inside the Zoom chat. We have several people watching for questions at all of the locations, but the easiest way to get your question answered is to become a member and sign into Zoom so you can ask your questions live in chat. Being a member is inexpensive, it's only $10 a year, and brings other benefits with it. Feel free to join us in Discord for our usual pub chat talk, which comes right after social distance learning. The link to Discord is in chat. Well, it's not quite in chat yet because I actually have to put it there first. There. And now to Scott, and one of the worst trigger pulls ever.
Yeah, probably the worst, at least in my experience. My old Tokarov was a close second, but it pales in comparison. And I have my trigger gauge out to show you just how bad it is. But it's sort of a symptom of the design of the gun. And if you're not familiar with them, this is the model 1895 Nagant Revolver. And Nagant was a Belgian engineer that designed this for Russia, Imperial Russia at the time. And the Russians used it from its inception in 1895 up through World War II. And this gun, in fact, was manufactured, let's see, where's the date on this thing? 1944. So they were running this clunky old revolver for that long. And I'm sure they probably stayed in service with police and other agencies long after and were probably shipped off to other Eastern Bloc member states and things like that. We'll start off by showing you that this gun is not loaded. Let's see if I can get where you can see there are no rounds in the chamber. You see no brass right here. So this gun is empty. And so tonight I thought I'd discuss a little bit about the gun, and then I'm going to take it apart and show you all the different pieces. And if you should ever need to work on one, they're really not that complicated. I don't know how hard parts are to get for them. I wouldn't suspect it's too difficult. There are two versions of it early on. They were single action and double action. The officers got the double action version of it, and the lowly enlisted personnel got the single action version of it. But eventually they just went to double action across the board. And this is, of course, a later one, 1944. And what's interesting about these is that this is one of the few revolvers that you could actually suppress. Sometimes you'll see in TV shows and movies where somebody will be shooting a suppressed revolver, and it's just ridiculous because you're going to have a ton of noise and gas and flames shooting out of this gap right here. So suppressing it is kind of pointless. But this gun forms a gas seal, which does allow it to be suppressed. So if you'll watch this gap right, see this gap. Let me get my pointer here. This gap right here, right in here. So normally that would be open on most revolvers. The cylinder just doesn't close that gap. But on this gun, if you'll watch that gap, see how the cylinder moved forward, and it seals off right there against the barrel, forming a gas seal. The reason they did it is because it gives them a little bit more velocity. You're not losing anything out of this gap. So that's what's called a gas seal there. And so that allows this gun to be suppressed. If you really, truly wanted your own personal meme gun, this is a good candidate. And I might just do it on this one. What I would do is trim this back and then thread the barrel and screw a can on it. But anyway, that's what makes these things really interesting. is the ability to do that. So this one I bought from a club member here in Oregon. I was out visiting his house on another matter and was talking about guns that I always wanted. And one of them was a Nagant Revolver. And he had one that he was looking to get rid of. And so we made a deal and this came home with me. If you're not familiar with them, they shoot a 38 caliber round, sort of more or less, but it's a really weird one. The bullet doesn't go past the edge of the casing. It looks like an empty casing. It was just laying on the bench. It's really interesting. They're not very powerful. The velocity in them isn't very good. They're difficult to shoot because the trigger pull is so bad. But I just wanted one because they're so weird and unusual. And I really like weird and unusual guns, and I like old Comblock guns. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start taking this thing apart, and I'm happy to answer questions as we go along. First thing, looking at this thing, you would think, well, I'm going to take the grips off, but you look at it and there's no way to unscrew there or there. So it's interesting, like what holds these grips on. We'll see that as we go. First thing I'm going to do is take out this rod here. I'm going to pull it out like so. And then the barrel rotates like that. So it rotates up and down. I'm going to rotate it out of my way. Then there's this little lever down here. And this may need a little bit of hammer action. And if there's any gun that needs a hammer, it's a Nagant Revolver. And in fact, you could probably use the Nagant as a hammer, if you ask me. Come on. And this gun is in remarkably good shape. So this slides just right out, this piece. Okay. And then from here, we can now open our load gate and our cylinder pops out. And there's nothing particularly unusual about the cylinder, but you can see that it's a 7-shot revolver, 2, 4, 6, 7-shot revolver. And interestingly, you see where they have milled this out around here. Normally, you don't see that on a cylinder for a revolver, but they've done that to facilitate that gas lock or that gas seal. So it's kind of neat. And then from here, we have a little screw right here. So I can get that on screen here. There's a little screw right there that we're going to unthread that. Grab a little screwdriver bit. And once again, I preach this all the time. Get the right screwdrivers. Get a set of gunsmithing screwdrivers or you're going to booger these screws up. And get what are called hollow ground screwdrivers. So we're going to take this little screw out. Set that aside. And what that does is it holds, get this little piece on there. And it has a little leg on it right there. And you see that little leg on there, right there. And that fits into this channel on the rod. So it's that leg kind of rides up and down this channel. So that's how you remove that that piece. Now from here, I'm not going to disassemble the barrel any more than that. No real reason to. And I don't want to have to headspace a revolver. That can be tedious. So that's the front of the gun, the most we're going to do right now. And next, I'm going to go ahead and take out, this is a big flat spring right here, and it's pushing up on this loading gate. You can feel it click, and that's that spring rebounding there. But if you take this screw out first, this is going to continue to push up on it, and then this piece goes into low Earth orbit, and you get to crawl around with a magnet trying to find it. So the best thing I found is to take this screw out first. And this screw is evidence of somebody that went out this thing with the incorrect screwdriver, and I'll show you what happens when you do that. So I'm just going to back that out and get this little screw out of there. There we go. So this is that flat spring, you can see the arc in it, and that's what's pressing up on that loading gate. All right, and if you look at this screw head, you can see how it's kind of chowdered up around the slot. And that's where somebody has taken the wrong type of screwdriver and shoved it in there, and it's slipped out of the slot and raked across the top of the screw head. So you want to use these hollow ground screwdrivers that look like this, not the wedge shaped style. So I'm going to probably try to fix that a little bit later. So once that's out of our way, we can now remove the screw here. And let me get a smaller bit for that. You got to be careful too on some of this stuff when you're using a screwdriver on things like this. What you don't want to do is use something too wide as you're coming in here, and use a bit that's wider than the screw head, because you'll end up chowdering up the finish on the gun. So you got to be careful that you get the correct width. So I'm going to go ahead and back that out. And this slides right out. And there is our loading gate and screw. And if I'm not doing anything with these particular pieces, I just put the screw back in there so that there's no misunderstanding of what goes where. So I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. Okay, and now from here, I'm going to take this screw out right here on the side of the gun. Let's see if I can get it. It's right there. I'm going to take that out, and you're going to see this whole big plate. Let's see here, right over here. You know, see this whole plate come off the side of this gun, which will expose all the lock work for us, and it'll allow us to get the grips off. So to get that out, go ahead and unscrew it. Okay. And then here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tap lightly with a plastic tipped hammer, or you can use brass if you need to. But you just kind of tap. You don't need to smack it hard. It should come loose. If it doesn't come loose, take a little Croil or penetrating oil and come along this seam right here and up under here and let it soak for 24 hours and then come back at it later. But so you see this whole plate comes right off. And to get to that grip, you take this screw out right here, and that will, it's really an interesting set of stocks on this gun. Really weird, the different pieces to this thing. So there's your left grip. There's the screw. And then from here, we have this back piece made out of the same Bakelite plastic that runs up the spine, the back of the gun, and has this serrated serrated edge on it. And you could take that piece off by loosening this screw here, but I'm not going to bother with it right now. I'm going to go ahead and put this back on there so I don't lose something. It's just always interesting how weird and different these guns were from this period. You know, everybody was solving the same problems with engineering, but just many different solutions to the problem. So this piece here, I'm just going to set that aside. Now we have a view of the lock work on this particular gun. And you can see right here, we have this big mainspring right there, which if you've been watching other videos in this series, this will look familiar to you. The Webley had this, and Colt used a similar spring in their revolvers. This is your hammer. You can see it work. We lock our hammer back, and you can't see the detail, but it's the sears right here. And when you pull the trigger, all it does is let the hammer drop. You know, it just moves that sear up and lets the hammer travel on by. To get this apart, I'm going to go ahead and take the trigger guard off. This is, I think you have to take it off to get the trigger out of the gun anyway. Let me get a fatter tip here. Take this. I need a thinner bit, thinner. All right. So set this aside. So this just slides right off like so. And then there's a little pin off of the frame that holds it in place. So you can see the pin right here. That's your trigger guard. And, it's cool. I love these old military guns. This is like the last two of the serial number. You can see 9.2 on the frame here, 9.2 on the trigger guard. There's serial numbers and proof marks. There's a star right there. I love these old proof marks and things like that. It's just really fun. So here's another view of the lock work with the trigger guard out of the way. And so from here, I'm just going to disassemble it and grab a pair of needle nose pliers. So to get this off here, what we need to do is compress it. And this lower leg of the spring goes up into the trigger piece a little bit, and then it's caught on an edge right there. So I'm just going to squeeze it a little bit with a pair of pliers. Let's see if I can do. I'm just going to squeeze and press them together a little bit, keeping my hand over it in case it decides to jump away. All right. So this screw, you'll see, has this little node or whatever on the end of it right there. And that orients itself into this little hole in the frame. So that's what kind of keeps it aligned, sets it in there like that. So from here, now you can just start taking pieces off. And this, we're going to remove our hammer. It just slides right off. Now we can remove our trigger and our hand like that. This is the hand. This is the piece that rotates the cylinder. As you pull the trigger, it pushes up and hits these little notches on the star on the back of the cylinder. So that's what advances it, is this piece called the hand. You can take that hand off. And then from here, we have, this is our quote unquote safety. This is this is what blocks the firing pin from traveling forward unless you pull the trigger. And let's see that last piece. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that out of there. Let's see here. Might just have to leave that one alone. Yeah, come on. There we go. Get that. Come on. There we go. All right. So that's it. That's a completely disassembled Nagant, with the exception of the barrel and the front sight. It's just a really neat, interesting gun. And I would challenge you to go out and get an old revolver and take it apart and learn how they work. These are a lot of people I talk to are just scared to death of taking revolvers apart. But once you've done it, it's really not that bad. It's it's not nearly as daunting as you think. So there's a completely stripped down, gutted Nagant. All right. Any questions up to this point?
I don't see any that are listed.
All right.
But there are a couple that I had for you. All things considered with regards to your FFL and whatnot, are you planning on suppressing this one?
I'm seriously considering it. I think it would be just fun as heck to have a suppressed revolver. But I'm also, at the same time, I kind of like it. It's a really nice example of the gun, not particularly valuable or unusual. They're available and they're out there. But if I run across one that's beat up and in a little bit rougher shape, I'd rather maul one of those than a really nice example. So I'm kind of hemming and hawing on doing it with this gun right now. It's like the same. I want to make a Mosin Nagant, the Aubries, the little, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're just like a pistol grip Nagant rifle. And I want to make one of those, but I don't want to ruin a good Nagant to do it. So I'm keeping an eye out for one with a busted stock, or somebody that's sporterized one or otherwise already ruined the gun. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put this thing back together, and we're going to just do it in the reverse order that we took it apart, and take this little block here, fit it over this post. There's a post right here. It probably doesn't show up, but there's a little post right there, and I'm going to so you get some contrast here so you can see what's going on. There's a, see that hole right there, just fits right over that post. And let's see here. Get it. Okay. All right. So that's back in place. Now we take this piece and it's going to slide right up inside. In this channel, there's a channel right inside the frame here for this to ride in. Get this a little bit. So you can see that drops right up in there and it slides up and down like that. Okay. Once that's in place, you can see where it's kind of notched right here. And that's where, you know, other parts layer in on top of it. So it gives you some idea when you get it apart, if you've kind of lost track of where you were, it gives you an idea that this should be on the bottom. But now with digital cameras, you can just take pictures and then reassemble it according to the pictures. But 30 years ago, when I started messing around with this stuff, there was a whole lot of trial and error. Like, how did this thing go back together? We didn't have stuff we could just look up online, and it wasn't that easy in those days. So, okay, we're going to put our hand back on our trigger. Yeah, right there. Feed our hand back up through the little slot. Let's go there. Okay, so you can see, I don't know if this is going to show it, but you see as I move the trigger right here, you'll see that hand kind of moving in and out. So you can see that that's controlled off that trigger. Okay, now we're going to take our hammer. We're going to drop it right back on there. Okay. All right, everything looking good. Okay, and then our mainspring here, you see this leg is notched right here. And this notch fits into a slot. Oops, this lighting's terrible, but there's a slot that goes into the back of this trigger. And I'll show you how that works. You get this where I need it. Okay. Oh, come on, trigger. Hammer, come off that post. Let's get the hand out of my way. Put it in the wrong orientation here. And does that not want to come off? This one will, that one won't. The way it always goes. Does anybody, Kyle, do you have one of these things?
I do. I have one from the same year. And
right.
when I picked it up, I was told, actually, let me rephrase that. When I brought it into the local gun store to show it off to a friend of mine, the Smith, he pulled the trigger on it and went, "This is the nicest trigger I've ever felt on one of these," which really makes me wonder what it's like to have one where it isn't a nice trigger, because it's still like a 16-pound, 18-pound double action and like an 11 single.
Yeah, I'm going to measure. I'll show you on my trigger gauge. It's pretty funny. Make sure that this goes in the right place. Let's see here. There we go. That's where it needs to be. There we go. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure that this little spring-loaded spur is aligned properly to my sear on the trigger there, so it's going to work correctly. All right, that's in place. So now let's get our mainspring. Like I was saying, it has this leg on it that's going to fit right up under here. And then this top piece right here, this upper piece fits right up under this spur on the hammer. So what I do is slip it in there, and then I've got it in the post in the hole back here. No, wait, I can't do it that way. I'm going to have to just compress it and drop it into place. So bear with me here. Be a little bit guarded with these springs. They're pretty tight, and they not going to kill you, but it hurts when you mishandle one, when you lose control of it. So what I'm going to do, slide that in. Let's see here. Get a bigger pair of pliers. This is probably the most tedious part of all of it, is just handling this piece. And it usually is on most revolvers. Okay, so get that in there, there we go. Okay, so now that spring's in place. Push it down, make sure it's seated flush on both sides. And let's see here. Where are we? What I got going on here? Just have something aligned wrong. Okay, take that back out. Yeah. Way back in the early days of this social distance learning stuff. Come on out. I was using my I had my Webley, and this spring was broken inside the gun, which was really fun. We were all taking bets as to whether it would come apart and gouge my hand, which fortunately it didn't. So, okay. Now, why is this giving me fits here? So it slides in there. Get in there. Let's do it a little.
Time for a hammer.
It's hammer time. Come on. See, it's not wanting to. I've got something out of place here, so take it back apart. So the hammer's not coming back. That's why I'm messing around with it. I got something aligned incorrectly. Come on, you stupid. Fun. But this is the norm. Take it apart, reassemble it 5 times until it's all working properly. If you're not, it's not like this is the kind of gun you work on every single day. So something in the way I have this hammer aligned was incorrect. So now I see. Okay. All right. I think we're good to go. Get that in there. So I didn't have the spring pulled down far enough. I was thinking it went under this spur. It goes under the one in front of it. So my bad. Take a different view of it to see it. Sorry for the bad information. Let's get this back in here. Interestingly, this mainspring also has serial number information on it, sort of electro penciled in. So I'm going to slide that under the trigger in that slot. Get this under there. Like, come on, get down in there. It's easy, I tell you. Working on revolvers is easy. So I jab my hand. There we go. Okay, there we go. There. That's how you do it. So what I was doing accidentally was I had this leg under this spur, and that's not where it goes. So it catches on that upper spur, but there's our single action, double action. All right, now we're going to put our trigger guard back on. Once again, it slides over that post in the back on the frame and rotates into place. Tighten this screw down. Just snug it up. I'm going to put a little oil on a few things while I'm in here. And I usually oil anywhere that, like, there's this little pivot point right here and right here. I like to put a little bit of oil on those things anywhere that you have a situation like that. Let's see, put a little bit right here. That shouldn't pivot much. So, all right, a little bit of oil there. And now we can, I'm going to have to put that screw back, or the spring back in, because as you can see, the only way to get this stock back on is through the frame, and I did it in the wrong order. So here we go. Another lesson on how to do this. Put our stock back on. That's what I get for talking and not paying attention to what I'm doing. Snug that down. Let's do this spring one more time. Okay, back in there. Sorry if I'm blocking the camera. There we go. All right, so now it's back together. Yeah, forgot to put that screw in. All right, so that's the lock work of the gun put back together. Now we're going to take this frame piece, this big plate, set it back on here. And fit it carefully, because we don't want to, this Bakelite stuff can get really, really brittle. So you got to be careful with this. You don't want to chip it up. And this stuff looks like it's brand new on this gun. So I'm being a little bit cautious with it. Okay, just make sure that's fitted flush. Take my screw. Tighten this down. And nothing on this gun am I putting together super duper tight. It's an antique gun, and there's no reason to really mess with it too much. All right, now from here, I am going to put my cylinder back in. So take this piece right here. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on it just to keep it from rusting. Where's my oil bottle? I like to keep things well oiled because they will rust. Get that out of my way. Drop that back in. And so this is the piece that's going to hold this cylinder in place right here. So I'm just, there we go. It drops in. Okay, now I'm going to take this rod here, and I'm going to slide it in, rotate the barrel back into position, slide this in, and now I'm aligning that slot with that groove so that I can put that little keeper back in, this piece right here. So I'm going to drop this little leg down into that slot and put my screw back in. Yeah, these old antique screws are really fun because they used such fine threads, and then they're all slotted. unlike today where we use a lot of Torx bits and Allen bits, which are much vastly superior for installing and removing things because the tool doesn't slip out of the head. But these old, really delicate screws with slotted heads make for interesting times. So I'm going to snug that down. Okay. So now I'm going to put my loading gate back on. I'm going to do it in the reverse order that I did before. I'm going to go ahead and put the gate back on and then put the spring on there. And make sure I get this tension properly. Well, sure that's sitting down there. And look at this screw. You can see that there's only like 2 little threads on the end of it. There's just not much thread on this. So again, you want to probably be a little bit careful putting these back together so you don't cross thread something. It's probably some weird Russian thread too that you can't get a die for. Okay. Now I'm going to put this spring back in, and it slides up underneath like so, and then you got to run your screw back down. And as you run your screw back down, it will tension that spring. It'll put the It's interesting that you have a good trigger on yours. I wonder what they did. I wonder what's different about it. If they hogged out some material on the mainspring to lighten it, that hammer spring, or what? That's interesting. Now it's tensioned. Okay. And double action, single action. All right, let's get the trigger gauge out. This will be fun. Last time I tried this on this gun, it wouldn't even measure. The gauge would not even it was just too hard. So right here, I'm going to go double action and pull. Yeah, see it maxed out the gauge. It will not even register that double action pull.
Do you know what it maxes out at?
20 pounds. So let's go ahead and delete that. I'm going to go to single action and get it hooked in place and see where you can see it. So 9.32 on the single action. Try one more. 10.98 on the single action pull. So these are legendary for just god-awful triggers. But anyway, that's kind of an overview of the Nagant Revolver, and hope it's helpful or useful or mildly entertaining watching me struggle with screws. Any questions about this stuff?
There were some questions that cropped up, but then they were answered by the next thing that you said. So
awesome. Anybody talking about how full of garbage I am and that I'm wrong about all of it? I wouldn't be surprised.
Only in the background between Ed and I, but that's the usual.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course. So anyway, that's